he's won his last twice, and both times very impressively. In fairness, he's had every right to win those races as he did. You know, the form of his debut at Newbury would have made him odds on for either of those races. But obviously, I was delighted to see him win as well as he did. The jockeys both times, Josephine and James, both reported that he's still quite green and still a work in progress, which is the only reason really that we're not going to go straight to the superlative with him. He's just a little bit more immature and babyish than we thought he would. He's growing up all the time, but he needs a few more sort of remedial classes at home and learn a bit more. The Pat Edery stakes, what used to be the Winkfield at the King George meeting at Ascot, could be a good target for him, or obviously the Vintage. The horse, you know, it's not only the way he looks that reminds me so much of Galileo Gold. He trains like him, he moves like him, he behaves like him. He is very similar. He reminded me of him the first time I saw him. And Galileo Gold was second on debut, then won his next two and went to the Vintage. So it wouldn't be impossible that we followed the same route. It's worked once, and we'd dream it could work again.
Perhaps history could repeat itself. Did I hear the Breeders' Cup mooted around as a possibility?
Well, he's a fast ground horse, and I am conscious by not running him in superlative. I might be shooting both my feet off, because we have had, as everyone knows, the most wonderful, glorious summer. And it hasn't rained for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. It will be fast ground at the July meeting next week, but who knows beyond that? And we could end up with a soft ground Ascot and a soft ground Goodwood and a soft ground Sandown. And you know, I know his owners would love the Breeders' Cup, and you only have to look at the winners coming out of that Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf from last year. I mean, obviously there's Mendelssohn, there's Massar, James Garfield won the Greenham. He came out of the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. So it's far from it being a hindrance for a young horse. I think in many ways that trip to America, you know, can make them grow up and mature. So you know, he hasn't done enough to get there yet. He's going to need to win a stakes race and probably be rated 100, 106, 107 to squeak into the field. And look, I hope he's better than that. And if that's where we ended up the year, you know, if we ended up with, you know, Racing Post Trophy is normally soft ground, isn't it? And obviously I'm talking a big game now, but you know, you've got to plan these things and dream. The autumn race for him that would seem to be most likely to be good ground or faster would be the Breeders' Cup.
Arbalet, you must have been really, really pleased with how he ran in the Jersey.
Yeah, I was absolutely delighted with Arbalet in the Jersey, and I mean, the only reason he's not running at the July meeting next week is that the only two poor runs of his life have been at Newmarket. He just seems to, you know, he'd rather go away from home to do his work and practice at home, and it just hasn't worked out for him. But he came from an awfully long way back in the Jersey and finished fifth, a career best, and I think he's a horse on the upgrade. Quite where we'll go with him next, I don't know. 7 furlongs, I think, is his specialist trip. But he could, you know, we could think about maybe the Minstrel in Ireland. It's you know, an uphill 7 furlongs. You know, he's not actually in the Lennox because I didn't think he'd like coming downhill at Goodwood. But we could wait for the Hungerford for him.
We're trying to film interesting horses, and he qualifies.
Yeah.
How does he feel?
Feels great. He loved it round there.
He's moving much better.
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
In Silver Quartz, we saw him working this morning, not going to the July meeting, but he's very promising.
Yeah, he's a really exciting horse, and I just thought he might. You know, he was only about 4 lengths behind without parole in the Heron on soft ground, and I remember saying to the owners then that, you know, his best furlong with it was his last furlong was his best furlong, and it was, you know, we reckoned that was either because he wanted to stay further or because that was the best ground, and sure enough it turned out to be that he didn't want to stay further, but we tried it at Royal Ascot, so we'll come back to a mile with him. Quite where we'll go, I don't know, but I would have thought the Thoroughbred Stakes at Goodwood, the Group 3 at the Glorious meeting, would be an obvious place for him. He's a balanced horse. I think he'd handle the contours of Goodwood very well, and provided we don't get the same inglorious washout that we had at Glorious Goodwood last year, I think it would be a horse that went there with a strong chance.
Okay, and talking of stable stars, they don't get much bigger than Gifted Master.
No.
How's he come out of his run at Royal Ascot?
Yeah, he's absolutely fine. Look, he didn't really have any realistic chance of being there, and James Doyle gave him a wonderfully understanding, sympathetic ride. He didn't have a hard time of things, and I don't think we've upset the horse's pride too much. He is in the Stewards' Cup. He proved at the Guineas meeting that he is capable of winning a handicap off top weight. He's proved that he handles Goodwood when a very good third behind Dutch Connection and Home of the Brave in the Lennox. And look, it's the Stewards' Cup. It's hard to win any handicap off top weight. But
Is he one of those that's kind of hard to place now?
Not really. I mean, like, he's won Group 3s, he's won listed races, he's been Group 2 placed, but he's at the age, he's a gelding, he wasn't bred by his owner. I think we've got to try and follow the money. And he won 40 grand when he won the handicap on Guineas Day. You don't win 40 grand if you win many listed races, So the Stewart Cup's worth a fortune. It's a wonderful race, and look, he'll be there with a furlong to run. That's for sure, won't he?
Yeah, and a progressive horse who you must be really happy with after his run the other day, Humbert.
Yes, look, Humbert's been an absolute star, and for him to have done so well this year with the weather we've had, considering he's a soft ground horse, is really fantastic. His second at Doncaster, his second at Newbury in the Spring Cup and the Spring Mile and Spring Cup and Spring Mile, respectively, either which way it was they were great. Bit disappointing at Thirsk, gone quicker ground the next time, but he got a hell of a ride from Danny Tuddup at stepping in for Josephine with her injury at Newcastle the other day, and he will go where it rains. He's an easy horse to train, he's an easy horse to keep fit, so we don't have to keep peaking him. He's not a stuffy horse that you have to work into a run, and so we can tick him over, and where it rains he'll run. If the forecast changed, he could run in one of, I think, is there a big mile handicap here next week? I don't know. But there's obviously he's entered in the Golden Mile at Goodwood. So if Silver Quartz this week gets ruined, at least it'll play to Humbert's strengths.
Very optimistic. Unforgettable Filly now. We saw she had a Falmouth entry, but she's unlikely to go there.
Yeah,
what's the story with her?
She's just lost her way a little bit, which has been frustrating. She's got the form in the book, so there's less of a panic with her than there is with some horses, I suppose. She's a Group 2 winner and a listed winner. But I'd just like to get her head in front winning again. I think she'd probably go, there's a conditions race at Haydock on the 21st over 7. We might go there and have a look at that. And then possibly the Oak Tree at Goodwood. I put her in the Lennox just in case at 5 to 10 at Declaration Mornings it looked like a small field, because the race is worth an absolute fortune. But we might, she just seems to, she hasn't lost any enthusiasm at home, but she weakened very tamely at Ascot, and might think about a pair of cheek pieces or something for her, see if we can refine the spark.